Hello there, welcome to Creative Autistic. I'm Lizzie and I'm a late diagnosed autistic person. I was diagnosed around 3 months ago at the age of 49, and I thought it might be interesting to share with you today 10 reasons why, although there are loads of reasons if I'm honest, I decided to seek out a diagnosis of autism. So, number one is probably one of the most common reasons why people might think that they're autistic, and it's basically social issues. I've always struggled socially, and I kind of went for years through childhood really struggling to understand other children. I'd often prefer the company of adults because for me they just made kind of a lot more sense. I just found children too childish, if that makes any sense at all. I struggled again socially throughout all of my teenage years and adult years, and I just really remember, certainly in my teenage years, wondering why everybody else got the scripts and I just didn't. I just really struggled in terms of trying to connect with other people, certainly in terms of interests, because my interests were kind of generally outside of the mainstream, and I think that's how a lot of people connect, isn't it, out in the world. And if you don't share a lot of interests with other people, it's really difficult to find things in common, isn't it, and to kind of talk about. So I would find that I would have to kind of sort of dampen down my interests and basically pretend to like a lot of stuff that I just really wasn't into. I remember at high school, some girls were really into Wet Wet Wet, the pop group, and it just wasn't my cup of tea at all, but I had to pretend I really liked them. I got the album. I even went to a concert. I think it was my first concert when I was 14, and it's just really difficult pretending that you're into something when you've got no interest in it at all, really. And as I entered adulthood, I had numerous difficulties again, and I found at that stage I was using alcohol really to be able to connect with people. So if I wanted to socialise with people, it would have to be in pubs or nightclubs, and there's a lot of sensory issues going on, in those kinds of environments. So the alcohol was used not only to be able to talk to other people, but it helped to kind of numb all the noise and lights and all the extraneous stuff that was going on around me, because autistic people will often suffer with sensory issues, and I've certainly had no end of issues with sensory stuff. So alcohol was really useful to be able to move all of that stuff out into the periphery, really. Number two is the telephone, and what a great invention it is. I have to give it props for that. It's helped us all connect. It's helped us build society in many ways, but for autistic people, the phone can be an absolute nightmare. For me, I've really struggled with the phone in terms of friendships because I don't mind too much, depending on the context. If I have to ring somebody that I don't know, in terms of maybe booking an appointment or something like that. And I think it's because there's a transaction to go through, it's very instruction based. So as long as I've got a clear idea of what I want to get out of that call, I'm generally fine with it, other than if I'm making a customer complaint in any way. I can basically go into a meltdown really easily, and it's taken me years to be able to try and deal with that, really. But I know that that can be a real issue for me, and I try and avoid it where possible. But where I really struggle with the phone is when I speak to somebody that I know pretty well in a personal capacity. I just don't know how to do it. I really, really struggle with not being able to see them for some reason. I don't know whether it's because I need to be able to kind of see body language, or I don't know, I've just always found it really difficult, and it's certainly led to the breakdown of friendships because of it. And I often get really stressed out whenever I give my phone number to somebody that I know, because I'm fine with texting, I'm fine with emails generally, although maybe I do have issues with email communication sometimes as well. But I think this aversion has certainly got worse in recent years because I've been way more home based because of chronic illness. And I think part of it is I worry that whenever I'm speaking to somebody that I know, how do you tell them that you're doing the same thing over and over? You know, how does one phone call become different to the other? And I get really stressed out about it, and I just don't want to do it. You know, it's really difficult to think almost creatively what I'm going to say to people, and I just find it really stressful. I find there's so much pressure involved that I just avoid all phone calls really. And I'm just thinking of one person in particular who is a friend I've had for years, and I really love her. And I know that she was trying to pin me down to a phone call a couple of years ago now, and I kept stressing about it and stressing and stressing. And I sent her text messages to say, oh, can't make that call today, can we do another time? And again, she'd try and pin me down to a time. And for whatever reason, I found it just really difficult to be honest with her, to say, I find phone calls really difficult, and do you mind if maybe we do email communication instead? I don't know, I just found it really difficult to communicate that to her, and we've kind of lost contacts as a result of that. And yeah, I just kind of feel bad about it really. Maybe as time goes on, I'll connect with people again and just explain perhaps about my autism diagnosis, and that may well give them more context as to why I've been like I've been, really. Who knows, I guess we'll see as time goes on. But I just want to say that this is just my experience with the phone, and I know that other autistic people have an aversion to talking to people that they don't know on the phone, so it just evidences how we're all different really, doesn't it? Reason number 3 is light sensitivity. And this can be a massive issue for autistic people, and certainly for me. I've always struggled with light sensitivity, and I wear sunglasses pretty much every day of the year. I just find everything kind of too bright. Even on a winter's day, I have to wear sunglasses because I just really struggle to focus, because it's just, yeah, just too difficult. And certainly on really bright days, if I'm not wearing any sunglasses, I find it just really painful, and I find it just really difficult to see. At home, I've got loads of fairy lights everywhere. As you'll see here in my studio, I've got kind of loads of them really, and they're on the other side of the studio as well. And in our sitting room, we'll always use lamps because I find the overhead lights just really too much. And I've always been really sensitive to strobe lighting as well. So if something comes on the TV, I'll immediately have to find the remote control to turn it over because I just can't cope with it. The flashing lights are just painful, really. Reason number 4, and again, this is a massive issue for a lot of autistic people, and it's sound sensitivity. I've got such an issue with this, and I can hear the tiniest of noises that other people just aren't able to kind of hear. I can even hear my eyes blink, which kind of freaks me out whenever I think about it too much. Thankfully, I can block it out a lot of the time, but it's certainly something that really kind of almost sets my teeth on edge whenever I kind of think about it. But sound in general is a real issue for me, and I find it really difficult to concentrate on anything if there's loads of sound going on as well. Like for instance, my studio is on a quite a busy road, and I'm finding it really difficult at times to concentrate on you and what I'm saying because there's loads of tractors going up and down the road today, so hence lots of jump cuts, no doubt. But also in life in general, it's caused me no ends of issues. I remember a few years ago, I worked somewhere that used to go out to local cafes and stuff for meetings because they needed a larger space than they had in the office. And they really liked I'm trying to remember what it was called. I think it might have been a Cafe Nero. It probably wasn't, but anyway, the whole acoustics of the place were just really difficult for me because all I could concentrate on was hearing all the crockery and bashing around of all the cups going on in the kitchen area, and I couldn't hear what my colleagues were saying, which was really difficult because I'd often have to take minutes for the meeting, and I can tell you it's really hard to concentrate on what people are saying and to take notes of what they're saying when your brain is kind of having a battle really with this kind of extraneous noise that is coming in at a louder volume than the voices that are in front of you really. It's really horrible, and now that I know I'm autistic, I can explain a lot of this, but at the time I used to think I was really weird, and I went for hearing tests because I thought there was something wrong with my ears and my hearing, but they'd always come back and say your hearing is actually exceptional, so there's no issues with it. So it was really difficult for me at the time to realise it was actually an information processing issue and not a hearing issue, because that's kind of how it felt at the time. So I'm just really thankful that I have the language now to explain why I've had so many issues with that. And also it affects my home life. If something is dropped in the kitchen and we've got tiles on the floor, that causes just excruciating pain for me. And again, I just thought I was being a drama queen about it, but finally I know now why I've had such issues with sound sensitivity. Reason number 5 is difficulties with hierarchical structures. I just find it really difficult to think why we as a society have decided that it's okay to consider some people better, more important, more powerful than others. So if we think about bosses or CEOs or the aristocracy, I just find it incomprehensible why we've done this. Whenever I look at another human being, I think it's another human being, and I just really don't get why we're supposed to almost be fearful of other people in this regard. It's just really difficult for me to understand, and even with my newfound autistic understanding of myself, I still don't understand it. Reason number 6 is I'm a real fan of rules and regulations, which is probably kind of weird when you consider that I'm completely not respectful of hierarchical structures, but that's kind of what law is, isn't it? Law and order. It tells us that we have to follow these rules and regulations, but I think I like them because it really means clear understanding for everybody, and through these rules we can have respect for other people, ideally. I just really struggle when rules aren't followed, and for instance I drove myself and a colleague to a meeting years ago, and we had to park up somewhere, and she went to get the parking tickets, and I said, oh, just pop it in the front of the car, and I was just getting my bags together, and she did put it in the front of the car, but when she closed the door, the ticket just went flying and it kind of landed in the footwell, I think. And as a result of that, I got a parking ticket, and I can't tell you the stress it caused me. I really wanted to have a meltdown in the moment over it when we got back to the car, because I was just absolutely beside myself internally that this had happened. And my colleague was really sorry about it, and she explained to me if I contacted the council and showed them my proof of purchase that it would be completely fine, and it was in the end. But I really, really struggled with that, and I couldn't get the whole thing out of my head for days. And yeah, it just took me a long time to calm down from that. And another example, and it's to do with cars again, but where we live, there's some designated parking for residents. And a few years ago now, we had a neighbour that I didn't really get on with him, if I'm honest, but he and his wife would park in weird and wonderful areas that weren't actually designated parking, and essentially they would cause obstacles for neighbours trying to get their cars out, and I just couldn't cope with it at all. I would be thinking about it all the time whenever I'd see a car that wasn't kind of in its right area, and just caused me so much angst. And I never wanted to speak directly to him or his wife about it, because I knew I'd have a complete meltdown, and the embarrassment of that would have been too much to cope with. So yeah, it just caused me loads of angst, and I was super pleased when they moved out, I have to say. Reason number 7 is stims, and stimming behaviour is really, really common in autistic people and people with ADHD as well. So it's a need for basically constant movements to help you kind of regulate yourself and your emotions, and it's just comforting. And I kind of stim all the time, and as a late diagnosed person, I've learned how to hide my stims, because they obviously look a bit weird to some people. And I do a lot of kind of making bubbles in my mouth and making kind of tiny clicking noises with my tongue. And when I'm not doing that, I'm often kind of playing with my hands or my nails. I was a nail biter for years actually, and it's only been over the last year or so that I've stopped biting my nails. So instead I'll kind of play with my nails, and I'm often kind of twirling my hair. Gosh, there's all sorts of stuff, it's just something that's kind of constant, I think, and it's a big thing with autistic people, I've learned. Reason number 8 is eye contact, and this is a real issue for lots of autistic people, and I've certainly had issues with eye contact for all of my life, I'd say. As a high masking person, or certainly somebody that's been high masking through my life, I've been able to develop strategies around eye contact. So I've learned to kind of look at people and then kind of look away quite a lot. And I've noticed that whenever I look at a person for any prolonged period of time, my eyes get really confused as to where I'm looking, because I want to look at one eye and then the other eye and then back to the original eye, and I'm constantly oscillating between their eyes, and while I'm doing that I just cannot concentrate on what they're saying or whatever I'm supposed to be saying. So it's caused me a lot of issues over the years. Reason number 9 is difficulties with employment, and this has been huge for me, and I've been so grateful to have my autistic or my autism diagnosis to explain why I've had so many issues around employment. And I think I've had around 40 plus jobs in my life, which is just a ridiculous amount, isn't it? And I've just struggled so much, whether it be with my boss. I've always had this thing where I think I'm always in trouble with my boss, regardless of who it is and how well I got on with them. I just found that whenever they'd want a meeting with me or a one-to-one meeting, I would just develop this whole dread for whatever period of time it was before the meeting came around, and I'd get really stressed out about it. I'd also struggle with colleagues, and the thought of trying to have friendships with some colleagues as well was really difficult. And on top of that, I'd often struggle with the work itself, and I think this is something that I'm going to do a video about separately because there's so much to discuss really. So certainly that's one for the future, I think. And reason number 10, and well done actually if you've got this far in the video, is routines. This has been a big one for me, and I've always really liked routines in my life, but I would say that it's got way more consuming as I've got older, and I've learned that it can be a real issue for women in their perimenopausal years, which I am. And certainly in the last few years, it's become, yeah, a lot worse. I found that I was really seeking out routine, and I just find comfort in doing the same kind of thing every day. And I find that whenever I'm not able to stick to a routine for whatever reason, maybe I've got an appointment where I have to go out, it really kind of throws me out for the rest of the day. So yeah, I just find comfort and stability in routines, and it can be really all consuming. So I could give you loads of other reasons on top of these as to why I thought, you know, I should perhaps seek out a diagnosis for this. But I think I'll do a follow-up video at some point, where maybe with another 10 reasons, because there's just so much information, isn't there? I'd be here all day if I was going to tell you every reason why. But I just hope you found it useful, and particularly if you're perhaps a self-diagnosed person and maybe you're thinking about seeking out a professional or clinical diagnosis, or if you're happy with your self-diagnosis, you know, self-diagnosis is absolutely valid for a number of reasons. You know, it's really difficult in terms of being able to access a diagnosis for a start, really, and on top of that, there's huge cost implications for a lot of people as well. I'm really fortunate that here in England, and I believe in Wales, that assessments are free, but there's huge waiting lists in order to, you know, get that diagnosis. But I'd be really interested to hear if you can relate to any of the reasons that I've given today. I'm sure you can, and a fair few at that, I imagine. And I'd also love to hear if there's some that you can't relate to at all, actually. It just really demonstrates how we're all really different as autistic people. You know, there's the saying, if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person, and it's so true, isn't it? But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll be back next week with another one, and yeah, give it a like if you got this far, and I'll see you again soon.